Okay, so guys, last time we talked about our expansion of our math program or moving those kids along. Joe, you were going to do some research on that. I know you sent out a survey.
Yep.
Do you have information to share with us on what you found out?
I do.
Okay.
All right. Well, guys, I think I've handed out to you an outline with some headings on there, and what those headings show is they're the results of my research that I've done. The first thing that I have down there is the purpose of the project. And again, if at any point you guys have any questions, make sure that you ask. But the purpose of our project, as defined by our administrative team, was developing research based on criteria for acceleration of math students, and we wanted to use a cooperative grouping approach. Now, I think I'll show through my research that some of you had recommended maybe the cooperative grouping approach with this was an awful lot to take on, and I certainly did find that. If I had to do it over again, I would tell you that I wouldn't have taken the cooperative grouping approach with this. So we had a 5 through 12 math meeting this morning, which went over the math acceleration, and we talked to that group about cooperative grouping. And one thing I found from the very get-go is that group we needed to enlarge just a little bit. There was a 4th grade math teacher that wanted to be a part of the process, so we included her. And there was also a special education teacher that wanted to be a part of the process, and so we included that person. The survey results that I have don't include those 2 people in them. So math acceleration in our district, we know, has been an issue for quite some time. It's something that we needed to develop criteria for, and something that I think we're well on our way now to developing criteria for. One of the things that I needed to do for this was to make sure that I gained the support of our stakeholders. Mr. Ahlstrom and I have had several conversations about math acceleration and how to proceed. Mrs. Wagner and I have sat down, the middle school principal, and have talked about it, and my assistant principal and I have had many conversations about it, and we tried to get the stakeholders of the math teachers at the middle school and the high school involved as well by sending them a survey. And as you'll see here in a second, they were very supportive of that. The need identified, what I did is I initially gathered information from simple questions to you guys. The simple question was, do we need a process? And you guys all agreed with that. And my needs assessment to those math teachers said, 83% of them said, we need a process. One of them said we didn't. I went and asked that one at the high school, hey, do you not think we need one? He goes, oh, that's not what I meant to put. So really 100% of the stakeholders, the major stakeholders, thought that we needed a process there. I want to go ahead and show you my needs assessment. The first question on there was very simple. Do we need a process for determining whether 7th and 8th grade students participated in an accelerated math program? And again, we had one outlier there, and that one outlier I did talk to, and he said, well, I meant to put yes. Otherwise, I wouldn't have answered the rest of the survey. So we had 100% of the 5th through 12th grade teachers think that we needed a process. This is kind of an interesting question. I thought, what stakeholders should be included in the process? Our math teachers all thought that they should be included in the process. That wasn't a surprise. Most of them, except for one, thought that the HMS administration should be involved in the process. The counselors of both the high school and the middle school, should they be involved in the process? 2 of the teachers said no, but 4 of the teachers said yes. I think that could have been a lack of misunderstanding of how involved the counselor at HMS and how involved the counselor is at Halstead High School in this process. They probably didn't quite understand all the work that a counselor does to make sure that the student's schedule works. And I think some of them were surprised by that. I think some of them knew it and some of them were surprised by it. District steering committee, none of them thought that the district steering committee should be involved in the process. One of the math teachers was very honest with me this morning, and she said, Joe, I don't know what the district steering committee is. And that was really enlightening to me as well, that we had teachers, many teachers there that didn't know what the district steering committee even was. But then one of them could define it. So we talked about what the district steering committee was and why it might be important that they're involved in the process. HHS administration, 3 of the 6 said that HHS administration should be involved. Then past current parents of students in the program, there were only 2 of the 6 thought that their input was valuable. Any survey that we put out right now as a district, we all believe in here that it's really important that we connect that to CCR, to College and Career Readiness. I shared this with Mrs. Wagner and Mr. Ahlstrom, the results of this survey, and I think it's always important that anything we're putting out has a CCR connectedness to it. Which of the following do you hope to accomplish from the Math Acceleration Curriculum meeting? This was interesting too because it showed that there was a lack of focus going into the meeting, because I gave them these options and really they were all over the map on this. Time to work as a content area, they thought that was important, 4 of the 6. Time to work on curriculum maps. 1 of the 6 thought, hey, this could be a time to work on curriculum maps. More cohesive schedule between Halstead High School and Halstead Middle School. There were 4 of them that thought that was important, but again, it's showing two of them didn't think that was important, and we all know sitting around this table that's really valuable information to have. Criteria for accelerating students, only 3 of them thought that going in, and then coming out, I think they all thought that. Developing letters, only 2 of them thought that was important, and it could have been the same person actually. 1 for HMS, 1 for HHS. Coming out of that, I think they all thought that was important. And then the rest of this was using cooperative grouping. I use cooperative grouping as defined by CITW in my math class. 1 of those said every day. 1 of them said every other day. You guys can read the screen there. But as defined by CITW, our post-survey results are going to be quite different than what they said going into this. I would use cooperative grouping in my classroom more frequently if, and I did put the option, I truly knew what it was. And so, but none of them answered that was the case. And my favorite question on here, this needs assessment is the best needs assessment I've ever taken. I had 100% of my respondents say it was the best needs assessment they have ever taken, which, as they pointed out, it was the only place that they could have marked. This is just a picture from this morning, talking to the cooperative group there. As you can see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 of them there this morning. And then this is just a picture of me talking to the group about the survey results. Okay, any questions to this point that you guys might have? And we'll have some time at the end here. Okay, one other thing I wanted to point out. The needs assessment with our walkthrough data. Our walkthrough data said, and this is somewhat alarming, is what Mr. O'Brien and I thought, that when we looked at our grouping on how our teachers are doing with their grouping, of our 71 walkthroughs, there was only 1 that Mr. O'Brien and I could mark when we went in their classroom for a walkthrough that they were doing cooperative group work. And that was 2 months into school. That was really alarming to us, and that's why we really wanted to connect this with cooperative grouping. We're hoping that our data down the road will show that this improves dramatically, because obviously we all know that cooperative grouping is really important. Okay, going back to our sheet here, the review of literature. For this project, we had to do a literature review. And I picked 8 different things out, and we looked at these this morning. The first thing that we did there was classroom instruction that works. Obviously, piggybacking on what we have done as a district to this point, and reminding them of what Marzano and DeFore would say about cooperative grouping and cooperative learning, how important it is. We also looked at an article that talked about pushing 8th grade students. Is that really the best thing to do? As you guys can see on your papers and up here, this article shows recent research which would be important to understand for our administrative team and our math department. It basically makes the claim that it hasn't helped students if you do it together. If you do it as a whole group, it hasn't helped students. Making cooperative learning powerful from ASCD. Number 4 there, differentiating cooperative learning. And number 5, the McQuarrie blog. Are we using more whole group instruction than ever before? And this article is going to make the connection between what my data said in our walkthrough results and what research suggests. Number 6 there, high math and lower grades. Is it hurting or helping kids? We looked at that. There was a lot of discussion about that this morning, and I'll share with you those results in our survey. Is it parents, number 7? Is it really parents that are pushing kids, or is it criteria that is pushing kids? Is it research that's pushing kids? A really good discussion about that as well. And then number 8 got a lot of discussion in our group about whether we should send a letter out. Halstead High School and Halstead Middle School sending a letter out saying, here's the criteria, here's why we're going to accelerate students or not accelerate students. I use Google Forms. We have all talked about the question of math acceleration and collaborative grouping as an administrative team. We prepared guiding questions for today, and also any meeting minutes that we have. That would be what we use for our data collection. Professional development, that occurred this morning. Mrs. Wagner with cooperative learning and how important that was, and one of our middle school teachers. The supervisory plan, that's something that ongoing I'm going to need all of your guys' help with as we continue forward. We're not done with this. It's not something that today we said, okay, we have it and we know what to do now. They certainly said they needed more time with that. The next steps after the presentation, and that's something I want to talk to you guys all about. Certainly we want to scrutinize the data from our professional development day from this morning. We want to make sure we progress monitor. Encourage participation at district steering meetings and site council meetings. I think that is something that's probably lacking, at least at Halstead High School. Share results with the district steering committee. We want to seek their input. We want to share the results with site councils both at Halstead Middle School and at Halstead High School. And we want to make sure that at some point we go to the Board of Education and say, here's what we've collected, here's the recommendation that we're going to make. All right. The results of the meeting this morning, they talked about some things that came up. They talked about high school credit. They talked about students in the gifted program, about how much should they be included or not be included in this discussion. Was it a negative social effect to take students over to Halstead High School to accelerate those students? Is that Algebra 1 class at Halstead High School the same as that Algebra 1 class at Halstead Middle School? This kept coming up over and over and over and over and over. This right here, we need more time to develop criteria. They were not satisfied with the time that they've gotten to this point to develop the criteria. And Mrs. Wagner came into that meeting and she did ask the question, if we really got this right, and I think you used the phrase, if it was a perfect world, what would this look like? And I think it's fair to say the discussion on that question was not very focused. Unfortunately, it was a good question to ask, and the discussion wasn't that focused. The conclusion, we were thanked several times for allowing the discussion to happen, and they certainly requested more time to collaborate. So where are we at in the process? Again, that group wants more time to meet to discuss the criteria. I think that's going to be necessary for us as a district moving forward. They'd like to see that happen before Christmas. So, Comments from you guys. What questions do you have?
Overall, what was the feeling of advancing kids, and at what grade level should we start that, or have you got that far yet?
I think there is support for advancing kids starting at the end of the 6th grade. I think they learned a lot because some of them didn't even know that there was a process at BPS, the MTSS process of BPS for differentiation, the Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3 instruction that goes on at BPS. I think that surprised them, and so they want to be on the same page as our elementary school. I think they do want more time to collaborate and what would the criteria look like, and make sure that they're on the same page, and then go to those other stakeholders and get input from them as well.
Is this to get into the Math Acceleration Program? Is it going to be student parent requesting to be checked with the criteria, or are teachers within the middle school and high school finding students to pull into the Math Acceleration Program?
Well, James, you know, because you were at the meeting for the majority of the meeting. I think you and I would agree on this, that the majority of them thought that we definitely needed set criteria, and then if we have a parent request, you go back to what the criteria is, and did the student meet the criteria or not meet the criteria? Yeah, good questions. Anything else?
Well, Joe, I was wondering, there's a couple times that you mentioned that the teacher said that they wanted more time.
Yeah.
So just off the top of your head, where, as an administrative team, do we put that time? And when we think about, we consider all the other needs, is that something that we embed into a school day, or is it during a professional development day, or how do we give our teachers time to make those decisions and be a part of those decisions?
Well, I certainly want to work with you guys to discuss what would be best moving forward. My recommendation at this point would be to make sure we do something before Christmas, because we don't want to bring this up and have them collaborate about it and get them doing work that they don't see as purposeful. If we come back to it in the spring, I think we've lost a lot of momentum we have for possibly developing criteria now. So my recommendation would be that we come back certainly before Christmas, and I think your two options are the ones that we should consider. Possibly a day out for that math department and get subs and everything, or at that November professional development day. Anything else?
I have one other question.
Yeah.
About the cooperative grouping as a result of the learning this morning.
Yeah.
Was that, you indicated that maybe you wouldn't have done it that way had you done it, in the future. But was there any connections between acceleration and the grouping that came from that group of teachers? Did they make any connections with how they could use that grouping approach to possibly advance kids?
I think that there was a connection, and I tried to point that out at the end, how well they did as a cooperative group. And whether they knew it or not when they were having their meeting for an hour and a half there, they were certainly a model for what was presented this morning. So there was a connection to me. Now, what we are trying to accomplish as a district, as far as them using it in their classrooms, I'm hoping that what was presented this morning, they now have the knowledge that they need to do cooperative learning, cooperative grouping in their classroom more frequently. And we're going to know via your walkthrough data and via our walkthrough data. Anything else? Well, I'd like to thank Mr. Chase Groth for being here, student at Halstead High School in our AV production class. I appreciate your time, and that's it for now. These are interviews conducted with Tom Ahlstrom, Superintendent of Schools, USD 440, and Amy Wagner, Halstead Middle School Principal.
Well, math acceleration, or any acceleration, it really has to be looked at pretty in depth as to what is the reason you're accelerating kids. And is it for those kids who individually achieve well, or is it something we're trying to do for the whole group? We've done math acceleration here of some sort for the last few years, excuse me, and what we're trying to do is put together a plan so we can get specific guidelines about who gets to advance and who doesn't. We just don't want to have it random that anybody that calls in and wants their kid to move up is something that they can just do. We want to put in place a process because we think those kids who can advance at a quicker rate need to have that opportunity to do that. Well, the positives are we've got a few kids that really excel in math, and we've been able to move them up and get them to a higher level by the time they get out of high school. Some of the negatives of our current plan or current process is that we don't have a specific plan, and because one kid moves up, a parent calls in and thinks their child ought to move up, and even though we statistically show them that they probably won't be as successful, they are still wanting their child to do that. And so that becomes a negative whenever you tell somebody they can't do something. So that's why we need to get some policies in place of what will determine a kid is ready to advance in the math department.
Well, that's a good question. Cooperative learning is one of those things that I think we're beginning to learn more about. And one of the things that we see in cooperative learning is the whole idea of the literacy skills across all curriculums. And so when we're talking about, say, a math curriculum, we may not see that there's a direct connection to that. But when students are learning, we need to give them opportunities to kind of digest the information and then turn and talk to a neighbor so that those cooperative learning strategies are kind of embedded in the math classroom. So I'm going to turn, I'm going to talk, and then I'm practicing my listening, I'm practicing my speaking, I'm internalizing what the instruction was, and then I'm able to kind of focus back on the work, and because I've had that conversation around it, then I'm able to do that. One of the other things that I think happens is that when students are doing math, especially after they've had those conversations and they've been thinking through, how did I solve this math, then also taking cooperative learning and turning and talking to someone and then journaling about that. What was I thinking as I was solving this? Or here's where I got stuck. And so being able to kind of think through not just the formulas of math, but having conversations about math so that I can kind of reason, discuss, and kind of show my evidence, this is why this is going to be solved that way. And so that's why I would think cooperative learning would be a good thing for us to, across all contents, but especially in the math area.